The film begins with a guy named Dallas, who's a super tough hitman. At that time, he's zooming down the road with his bestie, Trisha. They're in a big rush because Dallas has just taken out a whole motorcycle gang, and now they're hot on his tail. Now, Dallas has a rep for being super fierce when it comes to his job. But there's a mystery here. No one knows who hired him to go after the gang. What we do know is that the person who did hire him is a sly mobster who likes to keep things on the down low. Rewind to 2 days earlier. Dallas rocks up to the motorcycle gang's main spot, all by himself. He's on a mission to mess up their operations big time. But it's not just about causing chaos. Dallas wants to save some ladies who are being sold there. Plus, he's got a bone to pick with their drug business, since this gang is in cahoots with a big-time drug group in the area. Soon after, Dallas gets to the base and, using just a helmet, takes out all the guards. Then he unlocks the doors and frees the women trapped inside. Sadly, some of them didn't make it because they were treated so horribly. After that, Dallas heads to where they make the drugs. He torches the place, including the people making the drugs. But things get tricky when backup arrives for the gang. The gang's head honcho, Juan, had called in a favor from his pal, Larshall. Larshall's a big deal since he's the go-between for the motorcycle gang and the drug cartel. And now, Dallas has them all breathing down his neck. Long story short, Dallas got caught, and they tried to make him spill the beans about who sent him. But Dallas just chuckled because he actually wanted to get caught. His plan was to get all the baddies in one place and then take them out. And like a pro, in no time, he breaks free and uses his helmet to deal with them. Meanwhile, there's this not-so-good cop named Jimmy. He stumbles upon a body near the motorcycle gang spot, but turns out the dead guy was also a corrupt cop, just like Jimmy. At that time, Jimmy quickly rings up his buddy, Antonio, and tells him about the dead cop. Antonio, being the curious type, wants to dig deeper. He also gets a tip from Patrick, another shady character who's got ties with Larshall, the gang cartel middleman. Turns out Patrick's got some intel. He thinks the dead cop might have crossed paths with Dallas. Then he warns Antonio that if he's going after Dallas, he better be ready. Because Dallas is no joke. He's tough as nails. Meanwhile, at a quiet motel, Dallas and Trisha are trying to get a room and lay low. But out of nowhere, an old guy starts yelling at Trisha. Dallas, always on edge, quickly pulls out his gun and aims it at the old man. For a moment, it looks like Dallas might pull the trigger, but then he has a change of heart. Instead, he gives the old man some cash and tells him to beat it. After that, Dallas took Trisha to her room. But that night, it was really cold, so she asked Dallas if he wanted to sleep in the same bed, but he said no because he had to go buy something. Soon after, Dallas left, and while he was gone, Trisha secretly met a blind man named Blue. Turns out, Blue was Dallas's boss and mentor. Even though he couldn't see, Blue had really good instincts. He had been teaching Dallas since he was a teenager and just got out of juvenile prison. As time passed, Dallas became a really scary killer. At the same time, Trisha met with Blue to talk about Dallas's last mission, but Blue actually said something else. Still, Blue promised to help Trisha if she ever needed it. Meanwhile, Antonio had just arrived at the place where his police colleague's body was found. When he got out of his car, a mysterious figure appeared in the distance. It turned out to be Jimmy. Shortly after, Jimmy got a call from his FBI boss, who told him to hurt Antonio but not kill him. So Jimmy shot Antonio in a non-lethal place. On the other hand, Dallas got a call from Blue, who was a bit upset because the violence in Dallas's recent mission was too intense. This was making their cover vulnerable to the drug cartel and corrupt police. So Blue wanted Dallas to be more cautious. During their conversation, they also talked about Dallas's ex-lover, Irish, who had suddenly disappeared. There, Dallas started to suspect that she might have been kidnapped by Larshall or another drug cartel. Meanwhile, Trisha was at a tattoo parlor, getting a tattoo on her hand while waiting for Dallas to return. In the motel's lobby, a corrupt cop arrived and asked the guard about Dallas. After learning about Dallas, the corrupt cop shot the guard dead. Soon after, the police boss arrived at the motel, and it turned out to be Jimmy. Jimmy had brought his men to capture Dallas alive. Shortly after, the corrupt cop asked Jimmy what to do next, but Jimmy didn't respond and instead killed the cop. Jimmy then ordered his men to search the motel for Dallas. However, they encountered an old man whom Dallas had previously paid off. Not long after, Dallas appeared from behind and challenged Jimmy and his men to a fight. In that moment, Dallas easily defeated them all in a short time. On the flip side, Trisha also managed to control Jimmy by aiming a gun at him. Sadly, Jimmy turned the tables and fatally shot Trisha. Witnessing this, Dallas lost control and attacked Jimmy until he passed out. Late into the night, Dallas buried Trisha's body on a hill and tied Jimmy near the wreckage. He then questioned Jimmy to discover who had sent him. Jimmy, scared and cornered, confessed that he was sent by Larshall, a powerful mafia figure who had influence over high-ranking police officers like himself. After hearing this, Dallas chose to burn Jimmy alive to rid the world of another corrupt cop. Soon after, Dallas hurried to track down Larshall. However, on the way, he recalled his childhood when his father was killed by a motorcycle gang member wearing a helmet. Dallas had held a deep grudge against the motorcycle gang, and it just so happened that Larshall had strong ties to the very gang he despised. So Dallas reached out to Blue for assistance in locating Larshall's headquarters. On the other hand, Antonio had just regained consciousness, though he was in pretty bad shape. Fortunately, he managed to pull himself together and head home. The following day, Larshall paid a visit to Patrick at a bar. Larshall wanted to discuss Dallas, who was still evading capture. However, in the middle of their conversation, Antonio unexpectedly called Patrick, urgently requesting backup. At that time, Larshall was visibly annoyed by this interruption, as he felt disrupted by the call from the uncooperative police. In a fit of anger, Larshall stabbed Patrick in the hand with a knife, suspecting that Patrick might be siding with the opposing factions. Meanwhile, Dallas had just received a video sent by Larshall's men. The video showed Irish being assaulted by Larshall. In that moment, Dallas was consumed with rage and wanted to go after Larshall immediately. Unbeknownst to him, the video was a ruse. Irish was coerced into it because Larshall was holding her daughter, Samantha, hostage, forcing her to comply with his orders. Besides that, Irish was made to wear suggestive clothing, making it seem as if she was Larshall's wife. At that time, Larshall's intention was to lure Dallas to his headquarters, promising that if he took the bait, he would release Irish and Samantha. As part of Larshall's plan, Dallas took a taxi to a location to acquire weapons. To his surprise, the taxi driver had a connection to Larshall and had suffered injuries due to their past conflicts. Upon reaching his destination, Dallas was shocked to find Patrick waiting there. Unbeknownst to Dallas, the taxi driver had intentionally alerted Patrick, who had promised him money. Patrick then called in several of Larshall's men to eliminate Dallas immediately. Before they took action, one of them killed the taxi driver to erase any evidence. Witnessing this, Dallas lost control and took down all of Larshall's men. However, while in the midst of his outburst, Patrick struck him from behind, causing Dallas to lose consciousness instantly. Shortly after, Patrick took Dallas to Larshall's headquarters. There, Antonio called Patrick again, instructing him to hand over Dallas if he was captured. However, Patrick was afraid of facing Larshall's wrath, so he ignored Antonio. Nevertheless, Patrick knew that Antonio was likely tracking his location through the phone. Not long after, Patrick arrived at Larshall's headquarters and handed Dallas over. Moments later, Dallas regained consciousness with a gun pointed at him. Larshall's voice came over a speaker, asking who had sent Dallas to eliminate his motorcycle gang members. At that time, Dallas claimed he worked alone, but Larshall wasn't satisfied. There, he ordered Dallas to kill Patrick, who was tied up in front of him. Hearing that, Dallas refused, suspecting the man wasn't really Patrick. Then, when he removed the man's hood, it turned out he was just an innocent person kidnapped by Larshall. Soon after, Dallas sneaked into Larshall's headquarters to search for Irish. However, he was suddenly knocked out by Larshall's men. When Dallas woke up, he found himself in a prison cell with Patrick, who had been locked up for supporting two different sides. Meanwhile, Larshall ordered his assassin, Mr. Mask, to interrogate Dallas in a torture chamber. Shortly after, Mr. Mask injected poison into Dallas's body, but it had no effect. So, Mr. Mask resorted to electrocution while demanding to know who had ordered Dallas to destroy Larshall's motorcycle gang and drug factory. But instead of providing an answer, Dallas asked to be electrocuted once more. Despite enduring repeated torture, he refused to give the right answer. This left Mr. Mask feeling frustrated, so he decided to return Dallas to his cell. While in the cell, Patrick suddenly mentioned the name Irish. Hearing that angered Dallas because he hadn't mentioned that woman's name before. At that time, Dallas suspected that Patrick might still know where Irish was being held. To get information, he pretended to threaten Patrick and created a disturbance in the prison to draw the guards into their cell and separate the two of them. When one of the guards opened the cell, Dallas killed the guard and escaped. In that moment, Dallas was forced to collaborate with Patrick, an elite operative, even though Patrick's fighting skills were not on par with Dallas. Nevertheless, Patrick was able to assist him in defeating some of Larshall's men. On the other hand, Larshall grew increasingly anxious as he saw Dallas free from prison. Irish mentioned that Dallas could eliminate Larshall whenever he wished because Dallas was extremely ruthless. In response, Larshall became furious and mobilized all his forces to stop Dallas. Unfortunately for Larshall, his men were no match for Dallas, and he swiftly took them down. Patrick, on the other hand, appeared overwhelmed while dealing with the enemies, despite being a special forces officer. At the same time, Antonio and his team found the location of Larshall's base. There, he quickly called in special forces for backup, with the aim of apprehending all the criminals there, including Dallas and Patrick. Back at Larshall's base, Dallas had to deal with a pair of twin guards. They challenged him to a hand-to-hand duel, and Dallas gladly accepted. Within seconds, he had defeated them both. This only increased Larshall's fear, so Irish convinced him to release her daughter and make a hasty escape. Irish also pointed out that Antonio and his troops had arrived at the headquarters gate. Larshall finally heeded Irish's advice and fled his base. Shortly after, Dallas and Patrick managed to enter Larshall's room. In the end, Dallas reunited with Irish in that room. While Dallas and Irish were sharing a moment, Patrick suddenly viciously stabbed him in frustration because Larshall had just escaped. In reality, Patrick intended to steal Larshall's money. Witnessing this, Irish swiftly hurt Patrick, causing his death. Meanwhile, Larshall released Samantha and hurriedly escaped through the back route. Meanwhile, Dallas was taken aback when he discovered that Irish had a teenage daughter. He even asked if Samantha was his own child, but Irish didn't answer and instead kissed him. Shortly after, Samantha appeared and warmly embraced her mother. At the same time, Antonio and his team entered Larshall's headquarters to search for him. Sadly, Larshall had already fled. Soon after, Antonio secured Irish and Samantha and assured Dallas that the police would take good care of them. But then Dallas, who was seriously injured and in a tight spot, surrendered to Antonio. However, it turned out that Antonio had no intention of arresting him. He had an alliance with Dallas's main boss, Foner. Foner, a high-ranking mafia figure, had been giving orders to both Blue and Dallas. He explained that Dallas had to team up with Antonio to capture Larshall. At first, Dallas resisted because he preferred working alone, but eventually, Foner convinced him by assuring that Antonio wouldn't make things difficult for him. Furthermore, Foner mentioned that Dallas's father's killer was still at large. In the end, Foner was in a conversation with an unnamed, influential old man who was also a powerful mafia figure. There, Foner showed deep respect for this old man, who emphasized the importance of controlling Dallas, as a killer like him could pose a threat. Foner mentioned his plan to use Irish to keep Dallas in check. However, there was still one unresolved issue, which how to apprehend Larshall, given that the mafia would likely interfere with Foner's operations again. Unexpectedly, the old man smiled because he had successfully eliminated Larshall. He even something that belongs to Larshall in the refrigerator as a macabre keepsake. And with that, the film ends. The moral lesson from this film is sometimes it's okay to team up with corrupt cops, kill a bunch of bad guys, and let the mafia manipulate your personal life as long as you get your revenge.